My sister invited me to her wedding but banned my husband, so I exposed their hidden scheme and made them regret every choice they made. I'm a 34-year-old woman married to my husband Ethan for about 5 years now. Everything's been great between us, and we've always been pretty involved with my family, especially my younger sister Angela, who's 30. Angela recently got engaged to her fiancé Liam, and of course we were excited for them. I always thought Ethan got along with my family well enough, nothing major that stood out. But then something happened that threw me for a loop, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. So a few weeks ago, I get this wedding invitation from Angela. I was honestly pumped. I've been really looking forward to her wedding, celebrating with family, catching up with everyone, and just being there for her. The invitation was beautiful, like one of those fancy cards with gold trim, the kind that immediately makes you realize how formal the wedding is going to be. I open it expecting to see both our names, but nope, it was just for me. That was odd. I double-checked. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a joint invite, just my name, no mention of Ethan. At first, I thought maybe it was just a simple mistake, or maybe there was some sort of weird guest list issue. I didn't say anything to Ethan right away because I didn't want to freak him out if it was just a mix-up. Instead, I decided to get to the bottom of it quietly. Brr, I called my dad, figuring he'd know what's going on. My dad and I are pretty close, so I thought he'd be able to clear it up easily. But when I asked him about it, he seemed off. He hesitated for a second, like he was thinking about how to answer me. Then he gave me this weird, half-baked explanation about how Angela and Liam were trying to keep the guest list small and that maybe they didn't have space for +1s. I didn't like how he said it, though. It was way too casual, like he was trying to brush it off, and honestly, it didn't sit right with me. But at the time, I just let it go. I told myself that maybe I was overthinking it, and I'd deal with it later. I should have trusted my gut because later turned out to be a whole mess. Eventually, I had to tell Ethan about the invitation. I didn't want to hide it from him, and I figured he'd notice something was up when I didn't bring it up. So I told him. He took it pretty hard, honestly, way more than I expected. He's always been really family-oriented, and we've gone to every family event together since we got married. So not being invited to Angela's wedding felt personal to him, like he was being left out deliberately. And I could tell he was hurt, even though he tried to play it off like he wasn't. I kept reassuring him that it was probably some kind of mistake, that I'd figure it out. But the more I thought about it, the more uncomfortable I got. I decided to text Angela casually, like, "Hey sis, just got your invite, wanted to check about Ethan's, wasn't sure if his was separate or something." I didn't want to sound confrontational just in case it really was a mistake. But to my surprise, Angela didn't respond, which was weird because we talk all the time. A day or two passed with no word from her. I could feel this knot growing in my stomach. I tried not to make a big deal of it in front of Ethan, but I knew something was off. The following weekend, we had this family barbecue at my cousin's place. I figured I'd see Angela there, and maybe I could talk to her in person. At the very least, I was hoping someone would bring up the wedding so I could get a better sense of what was going on. During the barbecue, I overheard my cousin chatting with someone about Angela and Liam's guest list, how strict they were being about who they invited. I wasn't even really paying attention until someone else mentioned that everyone's significant. Others were invited except for Ethan. That's when I started to feel that growing feeling again. It wasn't just some mix-up. They had deliberately left him out. I decided right then that I needed to have a serious conversation with my parents. If they knew what was going on, they were either covering it up or didn't think it was important enough to address. So I pulled them aside later that day and asked them flat out why Ethan wasn't invited. My dad tried to brush it off like it wasn't a big deal, but my mom was avoiding eye contact the whole time. She kept saying things like, "It's just one day," and "We don't want any drama before the wedding." That was when I knew something more was going on, and they weren't telling me the full story. Later that night, Ethan asked me point blank what was up with the wedding invite. I didn't have the heart to lie to him, so I told him what I had heard at the barbecue and how Angela still hadn't responded to me. He was upset, obviously, but more than that, he felt singled out, like he had done something to deserve being excluded. And honestly, I didn't have any answers for him. The more I thought about it, the more I started to feel like I was missing something big. Ethan wondered if maybe it was because of a disagreement he had with my mom a while back, but that seemed so minor in comparison to what was happening now. None of it made sense. The whole thing was starting to wear on both of us, and I knew I had to confront Angela directly. It wasn't just about the wedding anymore, it was about something bigger, and I needed to know what was really going on before things got even worse. I decided to stop waiting around and reached out to Angela directly. I texted her asking if we could meet up. I told her we needed to talk about the wedding and why Ethan wasn't invited. After a few hours of no response, she finally got back to me and agreed to meet later in the week. She said she'd bring Liam along too, which I was fine with. I wanted to hear his side of things anyway. The meeting was set up for a casual restaurant. I told Ethan about it beforehand, assuring him that I'd figure out what was going on and fight for his inclusion. He looked worried but nodded, clearly hoping I could clear things up. He didn't want to go himself, and I didn't push him to. When I got to the restaurant, Angela and Liam were already there, sitting at a table in the corner. The atmosphere felt tense right from the start. Liam was sitting stiffly, his arms crossed, and Angela looked uncomfortable, like she didn't want to be there. There wasn't much small talk. It was clear we all knew why we were meeting. I wasted no time. I asked them straight out why Ethan wasn't invited to the wedding. I wasn't looking for any excuses or deflections. I wanted an honest answer. Angela shifted in her seat, but it was Liam who spoke first. He came right out with it. He didn't feel comfortable having Ethan at the wedding. His tone was blunt, almost rehearsed, like he had been preparing to say this for a while. Angela stayed quiet, her eyes glued to the table. I was completely taken aback. I had expected some kind of explanation about the guest list or maybe a misunderstanding, but this was something else. I pressed him for more details, and that's when he dropped the bombshell. According to Liam, Ethan had made some comments at a family gathering last year, something about their relationship that deeply offended him. Liam claimed that Ethan had made snide remarks and implied that he wasn't good enough for Angela. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Ethan making those kinds of comments? It didn't sound like him at all. I asked when this supposedly happened, and Liam mentioned a specific family barbecue we had attended. I tried to think back to that day, but I couldn't remember Ethan saying anything out of line. If anything, I remembered everyone getting along just fine. Liam, however, was adamant. He said the comments stuck with him and that he didn't want any negative energy at the wedding. He didn't want to risk any drama on his special day. I glanced at Angela, hoping she'd step in, but she still hadn't said a word. That's when it really hit me. Angela was siding with him on this. I asked her directly if she agreed with what Liam was saying. She finally spoke up, but her response wasn't what I wanted to hear. She said that while she didn't entirely agree with Liam's view of things, she needed to support him, especially on their wedding day. She kept emphasizing that it was his day, like that justified excluding my husband. It felt like a punch in the gut. I couldn't believe my own sister was okay with this. It felt like a betrayal. I told them both that I thought they were blowing things out of proportion, that if Ethan had said something it was probably just a misunderstanding. But Liam wasn't having any of it. He said he didn't want to take the risk of any tension at the wedding. Things started getting heated. I was frustrated, and I could feel my voice rising as I accused Liam of holding on to a grudge over something that likely wasn't even that big a deal. Liam stood his ground, though, and Angela just sat there looking like she wanted to disappear. Then Liam said something that really threw me. He mentioned that some of the other family members agreed with him, which is why nobody was making a big deal about Ethan not being invited. I couldn't believe it. I had assumed this was just between him and Ethan, but now I was hearing that other people in my family were in on it too. It made me feel like I didn't know my own family anymore. I left the meeting feeling more confused and conflicted than ever. Part of me wanted to defend Ethan no matter what, but another part of me started wondering if maybe he had unknowingly offended Liam. I hated that I was even questioning it, but the doubt had been planted. When I got home, I told Ethan everything that happened. He was hurt, furious actually. He swore up and down that he had never said anything like what Liam was accusing him of. I believed him, but it didn't make the situation any easier. Now it wasn't just about the wedding anymore. Ethan felt like he was being unfairly targeted by my family, and honestly, I couldn't blame him. Over the next few days, Things were awkward with my family. Nobody brought up the wedding again, but the tension was there, unspoken. Ethan started pulling back even more, avoiding family gatherings and not wanting to be part of anything involving Angela or Liam. It was starting to affect our marriage too. Ethan was frustrated that I hadn't defended him more fiercely, and I was stuck in the middle, unsure of how to move forward. I knew I couldn't keep stalling. The wedding was coming up fast, and I had to decide whether I was going to attend without Ethan or stand by him and risk a full-on family rift. It felt like I was being forced to choose between my husband and my family, and I didn't know if there was any way to come out of this without losing something important. The next few days were absolute hell. I couldn't stop thinking about the wedding. On one hand, it was my sister's big day. I had been excited for this wedding for months, looking forward to celebrating with her, the family, and being a part of this special moment. But on the other hand, how could I go when Ethan was being excluded like that? The idea of showing up without him, knowing how hurt he was, just didn't sit right with me. I spent a lot of time thinking things over, but I also knew I needed to talk it out with someone. So I called up my best friend Marie, who's always good at seeing things from a practical angle. We met up for a drink, and I laid out the whole situation for her. Marie didn't sugarcoat things. She told me straight up that what Angela and Liam were doing was messed up. She couldn't believe they deliberately excluded Ethan, and she made it clear that, in her opinion, I shouldn't even consider going to the wedding. Skipping the wedding is the right move, girl. If you go without him, it's going to mess with your marriage, she said. She wasn't wrong. The more I thought about it, the more it became clear. If I went to that wedding without Ethan, it would send the message that I was okay with him being left out. And I wasn't, not by a long shot. Meanwhile, at home, things were getting tough. Ethan was really struggling with everything. One night he just broke down. I found him in the kitchen, crying quietly. He told me how hurt he felt, how he was starting to wonder if I was really on his side. He said it felt like he was being pushed out of the family, and it was breaking him. That hit me hard. I knew things were bad, but seeing him like that, it pushed me to make a decision. The next morning, I sat down with Ethan and told him I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to the wedding if he wasn't invited. I said it clearly so there would be no doubt. Ethan looked relieved, but I could still see the hurt in his eyes. This whole thing had already left a mark on him. Even though he was glad I was standing by him, the fact that we were in this situation at all was painful for both of us. After that, I picked up the phone and called Angela. I told her straight, I wasn't coming to the wedding if Ethan wasn't invited. Angela sounded stunned, like she hadn't expected me to make that choice. She started trying to talk me out of it, saying I was overreacting and that I should just come even if Ethan wasn't. But I held firm, explaining that I couldn't attend an event where my husband was being deliberately excluded. It didn't matter how much I wanted to be there for her. Ethan was my priority. The fallout from that phone call was immediate. First, my parents called. They were furious, saying I was causing unnecessary drama and choosing Ethan over family obligations. They said I was being manipulated and that Ethan was the one creating problems. I was shocked by how angry they were. It was like they couldn't understand why I was standing by my husband in this situation. My parents had always been traditional, but I didn't think they'd ever turn on me like this. I told them the truth, that Ethan wasn't the source of the drama. The fact that he was being excluded from the wedding for some petty reason was the real issue. I tried to explain how hurtful it was for both of us, but they didn't want to hear it. They kept pushing the narrative that I was overreacting and that family should come first, no matter what. Then Angela texted me. It was a long message full of guilt-tripping language, trying to convince me that I was ruining her wedding by making this about Ethan. She told me I should just play along for the day, that it wouldn't be a big deal, but that only made me angrier. It wasn't just about the wedding, it was about the bigger picture. This was about standing up for my husband and our marriage. I wasn't going to back down just to keep the peace. Word started spreading through the extended family quickly. My uncle texted me saying he understood my decision and supported me, but not everyone was so understanding. I got passive-aggressive messages from some cousins calling me whipped by Ethan and saying I was blowing things out of proportion. It seemed like the whole family was weighing in, and most of them didn't see things from my side. It was frustrating, but I tried not to let it get to me too much. Amidst all the chaos, the one thing that kept me grounded was Ethan. He told me how much it meant to him that I was standing by him. He admitted he'd been afraid I might cave under the pressure from my family, but knowing I wasn't going to the wedding without him made him feel more secure in our relationship. It was a small silver lining in an otherwise messed up situation. In the days leading up to the wedding, the tension was thick. My parents and Angela stopped reaching out, clearly upset that I wasn't going to budge. I felt the isolation growing, but Ethan was there with me, reassuring me that we were doing the right thing. We spent a lot of time together, just talking and trying to get through it. When the wedding day finally came, I won't lie, I felt guilty. I couldn't stop thinking about what it would have been like if Ethan had been included. I knew my absence would be noticed, and part of me was sad that it had come to this, but I didn't regret my decision. The wedding came and went without us, and there were no updates from my family afterward, just silence. But I knew that wouldn't last. The real fallout was still coming, and I was already preparing myself for the confrontation that was sure to follow. The day after the wedding, I was barely awake when my phone rang. It was my dad. I had a feeling this call was coming, but I still wasn't prepared for what followed. He didn't waste any time with pleasantries. His voice was cold and sharp. "Are you happy with yourself?" That's how he opened the conversation. I could already tell where this was heading. I braced myself. My dad launched straight into blaming me for ruining Angela's big day, saying my absence was noticed by everyone. People were apparently asking why I wasn't there, and he made it sound like I had personally tarnished the entire event. He was furious, and I could hear the accusation in every word he said. According to him, I had put Ethan above family and broken things apart. I asked him if he had spoken to Angela and Liam about why Ethan wasn't invited. I thought maybe, just maybe, he had finally gotten the full picture, but he brushed it off, telling me it wasn't a big deal. That really got to me. I couldn't believe how easily he dismissed it, acting like the exclusion of my husband didn't matter. I snapped. I told him it was a big deal to both me and Ethan, that it wasn't just about the wedding. It was about how my husband had been treated like an outsider for no good reason. I could feel the tension through the phone as my words hung in the air, but he didn't back down. Instead, he doubled down, insisting I had overreacted and ruined the day. Not long after, my mom called, and if I thought things couldn't get worse, I was wrong. The conversation with her was even colder. She wasn't angry, she was disappointed. She made it clear that she felt I had let the family down by not showing up, that I should have just put the issue aside for Angela's sake. It stung. She kept talking about family obligations, but I couldn't understand how she could expect me to leave Ethan behind and act like everything was fine. While I was on the phone with my mom, Ethan overheard part of the conversation. He had been trying to stay out of it, but this was too much. He stepped in, telling them exactly how he felt, that they had treated him like an outsider from the beginning, and the wedding snub was the final straw. It was the first time he directly addressed them about it. I stood there backing him up, realizing how deeply all of this had cut him. I finally told my parents the truth. They had always treated Ethan with this undercurrent of passive-aggressiveness, and now it was clear that the wedding exclusion was intentional. I told them I wouldn't be attending any more family events until they acknowledged what they had done. It was a line I never thought I'd have to draw, but here we were. Later that day, Angela reached out. She said she was feeling torn, that she didn't think excluding Ethan would cause such a massive rift. She didn't expect me to actually skip the wedding, which honestly floored me. I pointed out that it was unreasonable for her to expect me to leave my husband out of such an important event, and that I couldn't understand how she had thought that was okay. That's when Angela let something slip that changed everything. She mentioned, almost casually, that it wasn't just Liam who had pushed for Ethan to be excluded. Our dad had also voiced concerns about Ethan attending, saying he didn't want any drama at the wedding. I felt like the ground had just dropped out from under me. This whole time I had thought the issue was between Liam and Ethan, but now it turned out my own dad had been a part of it, working behind my back. I felt betrayed in a way I couldn't even put into words. I immediately called my dad to confront him. At first he tried to deny it, but when I pressed harder, he finally admitted it. He and Liam had talked and decided that it would be simpler if Ethan didn't come. He downplayed the whole thing, saying they just wanted to avoid any tension. But that didn't matter to me. It was the fact that he had schemed behind my back, that he didn't even think to talk to me about it. That was the breaking point for me. I told him straight out that his decision to go behind my back to work with Liam and deliberately exclude Ethan was unforgivable. I told him I needed space and cut the conversation short. I didn't want to hear any more of his justifications. The fallout from that conversation was immediate. It sent shockwaves through the family. My mom tried to step in immediately, but I wasn't interested in talking to her unless they were ready to fully acknowledge how they had treated Ethan. I wasn't going to keep brushing this under the rug just to keep the peace. Ethan, on the other hand, felt both vindicated and heartbroken. He was glad I stood up for him, but the whole situation was painful. He never wanted it to get this bad with my family, and I could see how much it weighed on him. It was bittersweet. On one hand, we were stronger as a couple, but on the other, my family ties were fraying fast. Then came the social media fallout. I started noticing that some of my extended family members had unfriended or even blocked both me and Ethan. It was subtle at first, but soon enough it became clear that the divide was growing. I wasn't sure if things could ever be repaired at this point. After everything, Ethan and I decided to step back from my family for a while. We needed to focus on ourselves and our marriage, to heal from the chaos. We agreed that if my family couldn't come around and treat Ethan with the respect he deserved, we'd move forward without them. It wasn't an easy decision, but it felt like the only way we could move on from this mess. After everything that went down, Ethan and I decided to go no contact with my family. We needed a break, just some time to focus on ourselves and get away from all the drama. For a few weeks, things were quiet. We spent time together, trying to move past the hurt and the tension. No calls, no texts from my parents or Angela. Honestly, the silence was a relief. Then, out of the blue one evening, I got a text from my dad. It wasn't long, just a few lines. He said, "We need to talk. I'm ready to apologize." I was shocked. After weeks of nothing, here he was suddenly reaching out with an apology. I showed the message to Ethan, and we both had the same thought. Was this sincere, or just another attempt at smoothing things over without really addressing the problem? Despite my doubts, I agreed to meet him. I told him I'd go alone just to hear him out, but I wasn't going to let him guilt me into anything. I didn't want to get sucked back into the family drama unless there was a real change. We arranged to meet at a small coffee shop nearby. I hadn't seen my dad since before the wedding, and I wasn't sure what to expect. When I arrived, the atmosphere was awkward from the start. My dad looked nervous, which wasn't like him at all. He didn't waste time with small talk and jumped straight into what he called an apology. He said he was sorry for how things turned out and claimed that he never meant for Ethan or me to feel excluded. At first, I was hopeful, but the more he talked, the more I realized something was off. His apology was full of if statements, "I'm sorry if you felt hurt," and "I didn't mean if you and Ethan thought we were leaving him out." It felt conditional, like he was trying to minimize the whole situation. The more he spoke, the more frustrated I got. I interrupted him. I had to point out that his apology didn't feel genuine. It wasn't just a misunderstanding, it was a deliberate choice to exclude Ethan, and it hurt both of us. I told him that apologizing with all these F's wasn't going to fix anything. My dad's face tightened at my words, and I could see his defenses going up. He shot back, saying he didn't want any drama at the wedding. That set me off. I couldn't believe he still didn't understand the problem. I told him that excluding Ethan created far more drama than it ever could have solved. The whole mess was because they chose to push Ethan out for no good reason, and now the family was fractured because of it. My dad backtracked, trying to justify his actions. He said Ethan and Liam never really got along, and that he was just trying to avoid tension on Angela's big day. According to him, it was all about keeping the peace. But that excuse didn't sit right with me. It was clear that he hadn't thought about how it would affect me. How leaving out Ethan wasn't just about peace, it was about respect. I was getting more frustrated by the minute. Then he brought up Ethan again, asking how he had reacted to everything. My dad suggested, almost casually, that maybe Ethan was being too sensitive. That was the final straw for me. I snapped and told him straight up that Ethan had every right to be upset. He had been treated like an outsider for years, and now he was being pushed out of the family entirely. Of course he was hurt, and I was tired of people acting like it was no big deal. After my outburst, something shifted. My dad's tone softened. He started to tear up. He said he didn't realize how much his actions were hurting me. He claimed he missed me and just wanted things to go back to how they used to be. I didn't know what to believe. Part of me wondered if he was genuinely starting to understand, but another part of me was suspicious, thinking maybe he was just trying to get back in my good graces. I told him the truth. I missed my family too, but I wasn't going to sacrifice my relationship with Ethan to make things go back to normal. If he was serious about repairing things, he needed to make it right with Ethan. That meant giving him a real apology, not just some vague excuse about avoiding drama. I told him that until that happened, Ethan and I weren't going to be part of the family. My dad seemed hesitant, but he eventually agreed to apologize to Ethan. He said he would reach out, but I could tell he wasn't fully convinced. I could see it in his eyes. He still didn't fully understand the depth of the hurt he had caused. I wasn't entirely sure if his apology would be genuine or just another way to gloss over the situation. I left the meeting feeling cautiously optimistic, but also guarded. On one hand, I was glad my dad acknowledged some of the wrongdoing, but on the other, I wasn't sure if he'd really follow through. I decided to give him the benefit of the doubt, at least for now. When I got home, I told Ethan about the conversation. He listened quietly, and I could tell he was skeptical too. We agreed to wait and see what my dad's next move would be. But one thing was clear: we weren't going to let ourselves get pulled back into the same patterns. If my family couldn't respect us both, we were ready to move forward without them. A few days after my meeting with my dad, the apology came through, but not in the way I expected. My dad sent a carefully worded text to Ethan. It wasn't long, just a few sentences. He apologized for any hurt caused and mentioned he hoped we could move forward as a family. When Ethan showed me the message, we both knew what it was. On the surface, it was an apology, but it still felt impersonal, like my dad was just trying to check a box. There was no real acknowledgement of why this hurt us so deeply. Ethan's reaction was mixed. He appreciated that my dad had reached out, but it didn't feel like it addressed the bigger issues. He was still being treated as an outsider, and the text didn't change that. I reassured him that we would move forward on our own terms. We weren't going to let a half-hearted apology be the end of this. If they wanted us back in their lives, it would have to be on a foundation of respect. Meanwhile, word about everything that had happened spread fast through the extended family. Gossip was flying around, and I started hearing from some cousins. Apparently, there were still people who felt like I had overreacted by not attending Angela's wedding. They thought I should have just gone, even if Ethan wasn't invited, to keep the peace. But I was done tuning into that noise. These were people who didn't understand or didn't care to understand the situation. I wasn't going to let their opinions sway me. Then, out of nowhere, Angela reached out. She asked if we could meet up for drinks, just the two of us. I wasn't sure what to make of it, but after everything I thought maybe she had taken some time to reflect. I agreed to meet her, hoping for the best, but keeping my expectations low. When we sat down together, Angela surprised me. She started by apologizing for the role she played in the wedding drama. She admitted that she should have stood up for me and Ethan, but said she was trying to avoid conflict with Liam. She seemed genuinely sorry for how things had gone down, and I appreciated hearing that from her. But at the same time, I couldn't ignore the damage that had been done. I told her as much, that while I was grateful for her apology, things between us weren't the same anymore. This whole ordeal had hurt our relationship. I decided to ask her about Liam. Did he have any intention of reaching out to Ethan or at least acknowledging the hurt he caused? Angela hesitated. She said Liam still felt justified in his decision to exclude Ethan and didn't think he owed anyone an apology. That hit hard. While Angela was ready to make amends, it was clear that Liam wasn't. He was holding on to whatever grudge he had, and there was no sign of that changing. That conversation made me realize something important. Even though Angela might be remorseful, the problem hadn't changed. Liam's attitude toward Ethan was still the same, and as long as that was the case, I wasn't sure if things could ever be fully repaired. I started wondering if I could even maintain a relationship with Angela while her husband continued to hold on to this unnecessary hostility. Brr. When I got home, Ethan and I had a long talk. I asked him how he felt about continuing to interact with my family after everything that had happened. He was honest with me. He said he was willing to give them a chance, but only if they truly changed their behavior. He wasn't interested in being around people who didn't respect him, and I couldn't blame him. We had both been through enough. That was when I realized I needed to make a tough decision. I couldn't keep chasing approval or hoping for peace from my family if they weren't willing to fully accept Ethan. We couldn't keep living in limbo, wondering if the next family event would be another disaster. So Ethan and I agreed to set some firm boundaries. We wouldn't attend any more family events unless Ethan was invited and treated with respect. We weren't going to subject ourselves to the same passive-aggressive behavior we had been dealing with for years. It wasn't about cutting ties completely. It was about protecting ourselves and our marriage. We decided to limit our interactions with my family and focus on building a healthier, happier life together. I called my parents to let them know about our decision. As expected, my dad wasn't happy. He accused me of choosing Ethan over family again, like that was some kind of betrayal. But I stood firm. I told him that we wouldn't tolerate any more disrespect toward my husband. My mom didn't say much, but I could tell she wasn't thrilled either. It was clear that this decision had created a lasting divide. My parents were hurt, and Angela seemed torn between her loyalty to me and her relationship with Liam. I could tell things were never going to be the same again. The family I once knew felt fractured, and I wasn't sure if it could ever go back to how it was before. Despite all of that, I felt a newfound strength. This experience had brought Ethan and me closer together. We had been through so much, but in the end, it had solidified our commitment to one another. We weren't just surviving the situation, we were coming out of it stronger. We decided it was time to focus on ourselves and leave the family drama behind. We started planning a vacation we had been talking about for years, and even began considering the possibility of moving to a new city for a fresh start. It felt like the right time to look forward instead of dwelling on the past. In the end, I realized something important. Family is important, but the most important family is the one you build with the person you love. I knew I had made the right choice by standing by Ethan, even if it meant leaving some people behind.